Hello, I'm Norma. I'm a spellbinder, and Halloween is a great time for spellbinders because all of the stories are somewhat spooky. This is the story of an old lady in the forest who got the last laugh when she and her neighbor got the better of this spooky creature. Have fun. I hope you enjoy it. It was autumn. It was beginning to be cool, and it grew dark earlier. And this little old lady sat in her cabin, and she wove and she wove and she wove. And she heard a knock on the door. "Come in," she said, "come in." And in came two very, very, very large feet. And they settled themselves on the cold, cold floor. And she said, "How strange. These feet have come and settled on this cold, cold floor." But she sat and she wove and she sat and she wove until after a while she heard another knock, knock, knock. "Come in." And the door squeaked, and in came two short legs. And they positioned themselves on top of the big, big feet on the cold, cold floor. And she sat and she wove and she sat and she wove, and she thought, how strange. Those big, big feet and those short, short legs. But she sat and she wove and she sat and she wove. And she hears another knock, knock, knock on the door. "Come in," she says, "come in." And in comes the tiniest waist she had ever seen. She thought, this is truly very peculiar. This tiny waist and these short legs and these big feet on this cold, cold floor. But she was not about to interrupt her weaving, so she sat and she wove and she wove and she wove. And she hears another knock on the door. "Come in." And in comes the biggest shoulders she had ever seen. And she said, this is very strange. These big shoulders on this tiny waist and these short legs and these big, big feet. This is very strange. But she would not interrupt her weaving, and she sat and she wove and she wove and she wove. And she hears a knock on the door again. And in come two long, long, long arms. she sees these long, long, long arms fix themselves to these big, big, big shoulders. This is getting more strange by the minute. But she had to finish her weaving. So she sat and she wove and she sat and she wove when she hears another knock, knock, knock on the door. And the door opens, squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. And in come a pair of very, very, very large hands. And they go right to this strange thing there on the cold, cold floor. And they fix themselves on the end of the long, long arms. Well, this was very strange indeed. But where was the head? Oh, she returns to her weaving. She sits and she weaves and she sits and she weaves. When she hears another knock, knock, knock on the door. And in comes this very, very, very large pumpkin. Finally decides to speak to this strange creature. How did you get your head? It's a pumpkin shell, the strange creature replied. So she sits and she weaves and she weaves and she weaves. And she becomes more and more curious. And she said, where did you get those large, large, large feet? Much walking, much walking, much walking, creature replies. Where did you get those big, big shoulders? Much axe swinging, much axe swinging. Well, where did you get those long, long arms? Much threshing, much threshing. Well, where did you get those big, big hands? Many brooms, many brooms, many brooms. Well, what are you doing at my door? I have come to get you. Well, what to do? What to do? She takes what she has woven and she holds it up like a wall covering, and she swings it one way and she swings it the other. But this creature, with his pumpkin shell head, couldn't see and couldn't follow her. So she sits And she weaves, and she weaves, and she weaves, until she hears a knock, knock, knock on the door. Come in, and a squeaky door opens when in comes her neighbor from down the street. And she says, "This is dangerous. This is dangerous." Well, the neighbor had pretty broad shoulders himself, and he was strong. So he picks up the strange creature, and he finds that the feet come off, and the legs come off, and the waist comes off, and the shoulders come off, and the arms come off. All that's left is this head, which is not of much use. And so she laughs, and she laughs, and she laughs, and she says, "I'm not afraid of Halloween. It's funny." And that is the tale of the very old lady, the weaver, who managed to get the last laugh.